that little church on Liberty Hill. Come praise the Lord, let your cup be filled. Raise your voices and we'll sing. Let God's freedom ring from that little church on Liberty Hill.
Go ahead and open to Luke chapter 16. Luke 16 is where we will be today. If I can find it, 15, 16. Yeah, that's how that works. All right. Today, as we continue on with the teachings of Jesus, which, by the way, it's kind of funny because we were a little off topic last week with a guest, so we skipped a week, and then we're going to be this week, and then we're going to skip 2 more weeks because Easter coming up will be Easter themed. And then after Easter, we'll be back into Luke, right on track with where we've been. As we go through the Gospels, and remember, and we had no idea how long this is going to take. Textually wise, we're about halfway through the Gospels. Timeline wise, this is at the end of Jesus' ministry. I mean, even though, we're about a little more than halfway through the actual, book of the Gospels, time-wise, Jesus is starting to wrap it up. At this point, we kind of see a shift to where he stops dealing with Israel. He stops so much of doing with the outreach to the public, and now he starts to focus more on his disciples and preparing them for what is to come. And so, as we've been seeing, hopefully, as we've been kind of looking as we go through these, is we're taking a view of not so much, what would Jesus do, but what did Jesus do? Because we've said before that often what happens is that lovely WWJD, what would Jesus do? And of course, what do? We imagine what we would do and then put that on Jesus and say, oh, well, that's what I should do, right? People tend to make up what Jesus might do, and so we want to look at what he actually did do. And we're looking at the teachings, that as we are disciples of Christ, we need to actually know what he taught, right? Can you follow someone if you don't actually know their teachings? I mean, you can't be his disciple if you don't know what it is that he said you were supposed to do. And so here we see Jesus is going to turn and start talking to his disciples, but then towards the end, we'll notice there's other people listening in. But I'm going to go ahead and read the whole thing. It's a parable, and I want us to get it all in one bite. And so that way, there's some parts that are going to go, what? What is Jesus saying? That doesn't make a lot of sense. And then we'll go back and unpack it. So Luke 16, starting in verse 1. And then he said also to his disciples, there was a certain rich man who had a steward, and an accusation was brought to him that this man was wasting his goods. And so he called him and said to him, what is this I hear about you? Give an account of your stewardship, for you can no longer be steward. And then the steward said within himself, what shall I do? For my master is taking the stewardship away from me. I cannot dig, and I am ashamed to beg. I have resolved what to do, that when I am put out of the stewardship, that they may receive me into their houses. And so he called every one of his master's debtors and said to the first, how much do you owe my master? And he said, I owe 100 measures of oil. And so the steward said to him, take your bill and sit down quickly and write 50. And then he said to another, and how much do you owe? And so he said, 100 measures of wheat. And he said to him, take your bill and write 80. And so the master commended the unjust steward because he had dealt shrewdly. For the sons of this world are more shrewd in their generation than the sons of the light. And I say to you, make friends for yourselves by unrighteous mammon, that when you fail, they may receive you into an everlasting home. And he who is faithful in what is least is faithful in much, and he who is unjust in what is least is unjust also in much. Therefore, if you have not been faithful in the unrighteous mammon, who will commit to your trust the true riches? And if you have not been faithful with what is another man's, who will give you what is your own? No servant can serve 2 masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be loyal to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. And now the Pharisees, who were lovers of money, also heard all these things, and they derided him. And he said to them, "You are those who justify yourselves before men, but God knows your hearts. For what is highly esteemed among men is an abomination in the sight of God." Okay, now there's a few things in this parable that we have to stop and go, wait, what is Jesus saying? Right? That this unjust, shrewd servant is being commended for what he does? Did Jesus just tell us to use our money to go buy friends? Okay, so we're gonna get into that. Let's go back to verse 1 and just kind of lay out what's going on. Verse 1, so he says to his disciples, there's a certain rich man who had a steward. Accusation is brought against him that he is wasting his master's goods. And so the master calls him and says, "What is this I hear? Give an account, for you're no longer able to be my steward." So this man was a steward. Okay, this is a manager. This is the guy who handles the estate. So you have this crazy wealthy man. And we'll see some of the numbers that get involved here in a little bit. But this man has just tons of money, owns lots of things, huge estate. The steward would have been his second in command, the guy who manages and handles all of his affairs. And so an immense amount of power and authority over this man's property. It says that he was wasting his master's goods. That literally means that he widely scattered. That in the Greek, that word wasting, squandering, it literally means, it's a compound word, widely and scattering. So he's just throwing money around. Right? He could sign the checks, he could do whatever, and he's living large, and he's just wasting money, throwing it around, living the high life on his master's money. Well, word gets back around to the master, and so he calls him and says, "Okay, give me an account of what you've done with my stuff." Uh-oh. Because what are the books going to show? The books are going to show that he is in trouble and he is about to be out. So he panics. Verse 3, when the steward said within himself, "What shall I do? For my master is taking the stewardship away from me. I cannot dig, and I am ashamed to beg." So here he is. He knows he's about to be cast out. He's going to be tossed out on his rear end. I don't know if he is just unaccustomed to labor or if he's physically just a frail person, so he can't go work labor. Probably the kind of guy who's never done much labor in his life, has the manicures, wears the nice suits, doesn't get dirty. But then also it says, "I am ashamed to beg." This is pride. Straight up, I'm not going to go do that. No. I need to find something else here. He's used to living the high society. And don't we get used to a certain level of income, certain lifestyle, and then if something happens, it's really, really hard for us to step back away from it? Hey, have you ever known anyone, maybe you, who, you get laid off, but, I used to do this. I used to be a manager. I used to be a supervisor. I used to make this much. And you're passing up jobs because, no, that's beneath me. I can really go do this. I want this again. But then you're not willing to just go do what it takes just to get by. I've seen people who do that, burn through their savings because they're too prideful to take what they view as a lesser job. And so here this guy, he's saying, well, I can't do physical labor, and I ain't about to go beg, so let's just forget that. I need to find out something else. Verse 4, he hatches a plan. Verse 4, "I have resolved what to do, that when I am put out of the stewardship, these other people might receive me into their houses." So he called every one of his master's debtors to him. And he said to the first, "How much do you owe my master?" And the man said, 100 measures of oil. And so he said to him, "Take your bill, sit down, and quickly write 50. Just cut your debt in half." And then he said to another, "How much do you owe?" And the man said, 100 measures of wheat. And he said, "Take your bill and write 80. Let's just kind of knock that debt down. Okay, so at this moment, he's still the steward. He hasn't been fired yet. Technically, he still has the authority. These people don't know that he's on his way out the door, so he's renegotiating contracts with people on his master's behalf. That's one of those kind of things that once the contract is done, it's done. He still has the authority. It's still legal. It'll still be binding. So he's going around discounting their debts, cutting things down. And the amounts that he is forgiving of their debts is huge. Massive amounts. These two are representative. It says that he calls every one of his master's debtors, all of them. And it gives us two, but these two are representative of what he does for everybody. And so let's look. The first amount, it says that he owes 100 measures of oil. Now, a measure, the word that is, at that time it would have equated, 100 measures would be one measure, I forget what the exact word is, but it is a little over 8 gallons. So 100 measures of oil, this would be like olive oil that he's owing, 800 gallons of oil. Hey, cut that in half. That's a lot of oil. And see, the way things would have worked back then is you don't pay money. I mean, you have money, but these are things where they owe him commodity. This person probably has an olive orchard, and he makes oil, and so he pays in, barters and pays in his commodity, what he has. And this is much, much oil that has just been forgiven. Probably years' worth that it would take him to make, and it was just cut in half. Second, 100 measures of wheat. Now, if I did my math right, and I went to Robinson, so let's not, assume too much. If I did my math right, this would be about 20 acres worth of wheat. So this would be the amount of wheat that it would take for you to, get out of 20 acres. Back then, doing everything by hand. That's a lot of wheat. That's a lot of work. And he says, knock off 20%. 4 acres, that's a lot of wheat. It would take a lot of time for him to be able to get that, to be able to give it to this debt. And this is what he does with all of his master's debts. He goes through and renegotiates, cutting things down, not just a little bit, massive forgiveness. Why does he do this? He tells us right there in verse 4, where it says that they may receive me into their houses. See, this culture, more so than ours, we've kind of gotten a little away from this. But reciprocity was a big deal. Quid pro quo. Pay back. You did for me, now I owe you. Big deal in that culture. Right? Even now, right? Some of you older folks I know, if you give a gift, you don't get a thank you card. Ooh, someone's in trouble. Right? Because it's a payment. I mean, it's expected. I have done something for you. You were supposed to reciprocate. And that was massive in this culture. And so he's going around and he's forgiving debts. Well, now, if you saved someone, what literally would account to tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands, years maybe worth of income, think you might owe them a little bit? Hey, buddy, I'm down on hard times. Remember that time I saved you a whole bunch of money? Can I crash at your place tonight? I mean, it's kind of obligates you to the person. And so that's what he did. He's making it so that whenever he gets the boot, he's got a cushion to land on. He's got all these people that he's done this massive favor for. Surely someone will take him in. I mean, he's got the resume. Hey, can I come work for you? Remember, I managed his whole estate. Let me come work for you. So he gets to stay in his business. He gets to stay in high society. In verse 8, this is where it gets a little weird. And so the master commended, praised the unjust steward because he had dealt shrewdly. I mean, it's one of those kind of things where he's being shady, right? I mean, that this is definitely kind of, underhanded what he's doing, but it's kind of the point where the master looks and goes, wow, that's clever. Well done. Didn't see that coming. I mean, you got to give a little bit of praise to the effort and the creativity. Now, here's where we have to stop and back up. Jesus is not saying, don't put these words in the mouth of Jesus. They're in the mouth of the master in the story. Now, most of the time, whenever Jesus tells a parable, the Lord, the master, the king, whatever, represents God. That's not in the story. This is a worldly person with a worldly steward commending the worldly steward for his worldly acts. That's what this is. Do not read into this that Jesus is saying, well done, go be underhanded and shady and, conniving business deals. Okay, that's not what is going on. What it's showing is that someone who probably is himself underhanded and shady is going, oh, well done. to the guy who did something underhanded and shady. Okay, so the master in this story is not God. That's not how you need to read this parable. Look at the second half of this verse, verse 8. It says, "For the sons of this world are more shrewd in their generation than the sons of light." There's something we got to back up and take a look at what Jesus is doing. There's a common way that rabbis would teach and that Jesus teaches where it kind of takes the lesser thing and says, how much more should the greater thing be? I mean, if the bad people can do this, how much more should we do it? Here's a couple examples. In Matthew 7, verse 9 through 11, whenever he is talking about asking God, whenever you pray to God, it says, if you ask, it'll be given. But he says, or what man is there among you, in Matthew 7, who if his son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, you'll give him a serpent? But if you, being evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good things to those who ask? So he's using the example of the bad people know how to do this, right? If the sinners do this, how much more would God, or how much more should believers? In Luke 18, I'm not going to read the whole passage, but he talks about the parable of persistent widow, right? Where there's a widow who she's seeking justice, and there's an unjust judge who does not fear man, does not fear God. He doesn't care. He just does whatever he wants. And she nags him and nags him and nags him and nags him and nags him until finally he goes, I'm not going to get any peace. I'm just going to give this woman what she wants. And Jesus says, if the wicked judge can finally hear the petition and do good, how much more is your heavenly Father, the righteous judge, going to hear you and deal justly? And so that same idea, here's if the wicked people can get this right, why can't the righteous? That's the idea of what's going on here. Make sense? We good? All right. So worldly men are motivated to deal shrewdly, wisely, cleverly, in their pursuing of worldly gain. Okay, people will, there's all kinds of scheming and strategizing and tactics, right, that go on for people to get what it is that they're after in the world. How much more so then should the disciples of Christ, the followers of God, apply wisdom and cleverness and intention and forethought in the things of the kingdom? People do this in pursuit of temporary material gain that can be lost tomorrow. Should we not also deal shrewdly, cleverly, wisely in the way that we do things for the kingdom? We will work ourselves to death for earthly wealth, won't we? Multiple jobs, long hours, right? The things that it'll take to get by. But then we give little thought to heavenly things. In Matthew 6, Jesus says, do not lay up treasure for yourself on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasure in heaven. For where your treasure is, there your heart will also be. The treasure you pursue reveals something about you. What treasure are we pursuing? Jesus is saying that the way that the world, and often us as well if we're honest, but the way that the world is devoted to seeking after that material treasure, should we not be that devoted also towards heavenly treasure? What's interesting is this guy, he sees what's coming. Now, often we don't know what's coming. Right? In most situations when you can kind of figure things, maybe you can make some guesses, but how many people have a situation where a layoff comes and they never saw that coming? Now they got to roll with it and figure something out. Everything's going great. Stock market takes a dive. Oh no, they don't want my nest egg. I got to figure that out, right? We don't tend to see what's coming. We make guesses and we kind of figure it out. This man knew what was coming. Hey, I've heard you dealt badly with my stuff. Give me an account because you're out of here. He knows it's coming, so he goes and plans accordingly. But here's the thing. We do know what's coming. We know that there is going to be a day that we stand before God and he says, okay, show me. give me an account of what you did with what I gave you for my kingdom. We know it's coming. Do we plan for that day? Now, this is not a salvation thing. Do not hear that. Salvation is by grace through faith. This is not a do good things if you want to get in with God. It's not what this is about. We have seen over and over again that there are, it says, store up treasures in heaven, that there are greater rewards in heaven, that it says we're actually going to be doing things in heaven. So there's some kind of reward, some kind of system that's going to be on in heaven, which what we do here reflects onto that. And so that's what we need to consider. But then Jesus lays on some practical applications of this idea. It's not just, hey, you need to be doing more. Okay, what does that look like? Well, he gives us some. Verse 9. And I say to you, make friends for yourselves by unrighteous mammon. Okay, wait. Did Jesus just tell us to go make friends with money? Go buy some friends with unrighteous money. Okay, there's some things we got to unpack there because that just seems kind of weird. Mammon is just the Aramaic word for wealth. That's all it is. Money, wealth, material possession. Aramaic was kind of the language that was widely spoken in Galilee and in that area, so Jesus would have spoke Aramaic. It was just the people he was talking to spoke Aramaic, and he uses the Aramaic term. So it says to go make friends for yourself by unrighteous money. I don't think that we need to hear wickedly gained, right? That this isn't that you did something unrighteous to get the money. What he's saying is unrighteous wealth, unrighteous gain, as compared to heavenly wealth, heavenly treasure. Right? The unrighteous is probably better understand as just worldly. Right? So go make friends for yourself by means of worldly money, cash, the money you have, these things that God has given you. And so he says that do this, that when you fail, they may receive you into an everlasting home. And that's something we need to understand here. He's not talking about buying friends. Hey, if you got some money, go use it to get some people to like you. That's not what this is. Jesus actually teaches elsewhere where he says, don't do things for people just to get something in return. Right? We're supposed to be generous just to be generous. So there's something going on here. There's got to be something else that we're missing in the translation or something. And so here's what I think it is. I think that he is showing whenever he says that when you fail, or some translations say when it fails, that is money, they may receive you into an everlasting home. Well, what home is that? It's heaven. He's not talking about make you some friends so when the market crashes, you got someone's couch to sleep on. That's not what he's saying. It's that as you steward your money, as you are generous with your possessions, as you take the things that God has given you and you spread it to others, you're being a blessing, and that the day will come that you go to heaven and you are welcomed in for the blessing that you did to people. There are a couple other ways that our money fails. In a worldly sense, money can fail you because you ain't got any. Right? I mean, that's one of the ways money can fail you. You don't have any, you need some, you wish you had some, you want some. Another way money can fail you is you have plenty and you find out it doesn't fulfill. You go back and read Ecclesiastes, and Ecclesiastes is one of those books you have to be careful not to just pick things out of, because there's an ongoing storyline where Solomon is basically saying, I had so much wealth. I did not hold anything back from myself. I pursued pleasure everywhere I could find it. And the end result that he comes to is, it's all meaningless, worthless. There is no good pleasure to be found, no lasting fulfillment to be found in worldly things. That's one way that your money can fail you. You got all of it you could want, and you can satisfy every desire you have, and you find out it is empty. But I think specifically what he is referring to here is heaven. What comes to mind is, have you heard that song by Ray Boltz, Thank You? Love that song. If you're not familiar with the song, it starts out, it's like, hey, I had a dream, went to heaven, and you were there, and there's just all these people coming by saying, thank you. Thank you for what you did. Hey, you know what? You did this one time, and you didn't know it, but that blessed me. Hey, this one time you gave to this ministry, you didn't know what that was going to do, but then down the line, I was blessed by that ministry. And the chorus goes, thank you for giving to the Lord. I am a life that was changed. Thank you for giving to the Lord. I am so glad that you gave. And so that's what he is talking about here, that you take what God has given you to spread his kingdom, not yours. And whenever you come into your eternal home, there's people who are going, thank you. Come on in. You aren't going to believe what ended up happening because you gave there, because you did this. Thank you that you are welcomed in. And then he gives us a little more practical application. Verse 10. He who is faithful in what is least is faithful also in much, and he who is unjust in what is least is unjust also in much. Don't you know this is true? Money doesn't make you better. It's easy whenever you don't have any to think, oh, if I just could get by, if I just had enough that I didn't have to worry and stress all the time about how to make ends meet, if I could only have, you ever notice that the people who win the lotto, what is it, something like 85% end up bankrupt within 2 or 3 years? Because the people who tend to play the lotto are the ones who can't manage their money anyway. And that's just a statistical fact. The people who tend to play the lotto are the ones who aren't any good with money. So they get a whole bunch of money, all of a sudden, what? They're good with money? No. It magnifies what is already in you. If you're going to do bad things with money, when you get a whole bunch of money, you'll just do a whole bunch of bad things. If you're generous with just a little bit, when you get a whole bunch of money, you're going to be generous with a bunch of it. Money reveals what is already in your heart. It does not change it. Verse 11. Therefore, if you have not been faithful in the unrighteous mammon, again, worldly money, with your earthly possessions, who will commit to your trust the true riches? And if you have not been faithful in what is another man's, who will give to you what is your own? I'm not there yet, but I can quickly see the day coming that I'm going to have to hand over the keys to a car to one of my kids. Now, if they've been driving mine and they're careless with it, why am I going to buy them their own? No, I don't think so. That's not how that works. We kind of see how that works in other scenarios, but let's also kind of put this into our relationship with God. He's given us stuff here. Now, we've already said that there's some kind of, I don't know if I want to call it hierarchy. There's different jobs. It says we'll rule over angels. I don't know who's going to be doing what exactly or how all that fleshes out. The Bible doesn't give us specifics, but it does show us that there is greater reward in heaven. Okay, what exactly does that look like? I'm not entirely sure, but here it's saying if you took what God gave you on the earth and you just squandered it, why are you expecting so much more in heaven? I mean, you'll be in heaven. I'd rather be in the slums in heaven than, anywhere else. Amen. But, if we're thinking, well, I'm going to be up there, I'm going to be ruling over angels, I'm going to be doing this, I'm going to be doing that. I don't know, are you? Because what are you doing here? Are you showing yourself here that you are capable of doing that there? We do not own anything in this world. That one's hard to hear, isn't it? Because I made that money. That was my job, my money. I bought that thing. It's mine, right? That's how it feels. That's how it seems. No, the Bible's pretty clear. Everything in the world belongs to God. Whatever you have in your hands or in your bank account, that's God's. He's letting you have it. And as disciples of Christ, our mission to spread the gospel, to push the light into the darkness, to bring order to the chaos, is to use what he has given us for his purpose. Not to squander it for our own. We are his stewards in this world, his property, his money. Are we like the steward in the parable, though? Squandering it, spreading it widely? Verse 13. No servant can serve two masters. For either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he's going to be loyal to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and material gain. He doesn't just say that we know there's going to be this tension, right? If you have two masters, you got some tension going on because there's going to be a conflict. But notice he says it's not just that you're going to choose one over the other. It says you will despise one. There will actually be some anger. There's going to be some conflict on your demands, and you're going to have to choose. And in choosing, there's often going to be blame on the one that you like least. I know most of y'all have kids that are grown and out, but I know a big thing that goes on in the church, just nationwide, in our culture, is sports. I remember when I was a kid, not that I was active in sports, but the little bit that I did, we never had practice on Wednesday night. That didn't happen. Wednesdays and Sundays were off limits because we were going to church. Nowadays, not so. And so parents are, or kids, if the parents are letting them make their own decisions, are put into a situation where it's like, do I choose church or do I choose practice? Well, if I want to play this weekend, I got to show up at practice. Well, hey, you know what? They're having a tournament or the game's going to be on a Sunday. Okay, well, now I got to choose. Well, who are you serving? Are you serving sports or are you serving God? Are you going to church? Are you going to the game? And what's interesting is people, you listen to the way people talk. It says that you will be loyal to one and despise the other. Because if you hear people who are loyal to God, you go to church. I cannot believe that they have practices on Wednesday nights. Why would they do that? Or you can hear the other side. Look, okay, we go to church. We're there when we can. Why are you people getting so uptight about us not being there on Wednesday night? It's one night. See the way it goes. Where's the loyalty? And there's the anger and blame towards the other. Anyone ever water skied? Any water skiers? I mean, even just once or twice. I got one, all right. You've seen it done, right? Could you imagine, what if you're water skiing between two boats? You're right? That ain't going to work out good. What happens whenever they go two different ways? You're going to have to pick one and let go, right? Or if you've snow skied, you don't know how to do that wedge right, it just kind of that didn't end up good either. All right. But things are going to come where it's like you got to choose one or the other. You follow God or you're going to follow worldly possession. You cannot serve both. Verse 14. But there were eavesdroppers. Now the Pharisees, who were lovers of money, also heard these things, and they derided him. That word deride, I love this word. Literally, it means to blow out of the nostrils. Kind of idiomatically, it means to turn your nose up at, to scoff. I mean, you can almost kind of hear the, kind of a little thing going on. It's like a turn their nose up at. They're mocking him. He just laid out that you can't love money and God. And the people who love money are going, whatever. Mocking him. Scoffing at him. Proving his point. Verse 15. And he said to them, you are those who justify yourselves before men, but God knows your hearts. For what is highly esteemed among men is an abomination in the sight of God. It's one of the struggles because we have to have money to get by. Right? I mean, you want food unless you're, growing it yourself. You got to go to the store. There's even some things you can't grow. You're going to have to go somewhere to get something. Right? We're going to need material possessions just to get by, even minimally. The Bible never says that money's a bad thing. It never says that wealth is necessarily a bad thing. It warns against it. It talks about the troubles you'll have with it. It talks about the temptations it might bring. But if you look through the scriptures, it never condemns anyone for having money. Abraham was filthy rich. Whenever you're rich enough that you have enough guys working for you that you can go to war and win, that's pretty rich. Whenever you're wealthy to the point where it's like, you know what, there's not enough land for both of us, Abraham and Lot, let's split up because our herds are too big. Right? That's some money. Job was crazy rich whenever you read that story. Not only was he rich, he lost it all and then God gave it back to him tenfold. Okay? Jacob, also quite wealthy, even though he was a little underhanded, but he followed the Lord and the Lord blessed him. David and Solomon's probably one of the wealthiest people ever to walk the earth. There's a lady in the New Testament called Lydia that Paul comes across, and Lydia is leading a Bible study down by the river. And it says that she is a dealer in fabrics. She's got a textile industry, and it says that she deals, because they're in Philippi, but it mentions that she has a business over in this other city. So she's got an international textile business. She's got some money. Paul never tells her, hey, go sell that. Go sell that. You got too much money. No. But there she is, serving God, following Christ, studying the Scripture. Several places in the New Testament where it obviously assumes there are a mixture of rich and poor in the church. And nowhere does Paul say, hey, rich people, get rid of it. You're not supposed to have that. It says how you should deal with it. It says how you should follow Christ and honor God with it. But it never says that it's a bad thing to have it. So let's just go ahead and get that out of the way, that wealth is never presented in the Bible as necessarily being a bad thing. There are temptations and struggles that come with it, and the Bible addresses those. The point here is one of priority and one of ownership. Whose money is it? God's. Not yours. Feels like it's yours. It's not. It's His. And what are you doing with it? Are you being intentional with the way you're dealing with your money? Are you pursuing earthly gains? Or are you using what you have in worldly gains to pursue kingdom ends? Are you using what belongs to God that He has given you to further His kingdom or yours? That's ultimately this is getting down to. That steward was taking what belonged to his master and he was using it for his own gain. And whenever he saw the end coming, that an account was coming, he made plans accordingly. And so now here we stand being given abundance by our master. Are we using it for ourselves or for His purposes? Because the day's coming when we'll have to give an account. Are we planning accordingly?
Every time I feel the walls closing, You cover me and breathe life in me again. Lord, though I feel the darkness come, I will not fear. You've ransomed me with blood.